議員係，我哋而家咧就預備開。
So we're about to begin the third session. A number of deputations are coming. There are more organizations represented in this session. So deputations, please be seated. If you don't mind. So please be seated and welcome you all. First of all, let me welcome deputations for coming, and the administration is also here. You can see 5 officers from the Environmental Protection Department, and please be reminded that deputations individuals, if you so need, you can make use of the headphones. Channel 1 is Cantonese, Channel 2 is English, and Channel 3 is Putonghua. And at the beginning of each session, I need to remind you that your submissions and your comments are not protected by the Special Powers and Privileges Ordinance. Please take note that within the complex, when you are attending a meeting or whether you're sitting on the public gallery or not, you need to be mindful of the public security measures, and the notice of the measures are put before you. For those who are in the gallery, please, if you want, you can get a copy from our security officers. And this session will end at about 7:40. So each deputation, please make use of the time. You have just about 2.5 minutes to speak.
好。咁咧就如果你大家有發言
If you have a speech that you're ready to submit, please write down your name and your organization. You can pass it to our staff, and they will give it to us later on for reference. I know that there's a Miss Yu sitting in a corner because of an emergency. Well, usually we have a queue, but because she needs to leave early, would you mind let her speak first? Because she has an emergency, she has to leave first. Okay, Miss Yu then. Thank you. Please start. Thank you, Chairman, and for your understanding. As an ordinary member of the public, I'm very pleased to have this chance to have this MSW charging scheme. But besides being an economic incentive, you do have to have the support of recycling facilities to achieve the goal. You know that in every district, the government is going to have the community green station But the development of such stations is very slow, and the construction costs are high, and they tend to be in remote locations. Usually, most people are not willing to go all the way to the green station. So I would suggest that when you implement the scheme, you should try to remodel refuse collection points or use public spaces, facilities which are not often used to be used, turn them into recycling points, particularly in areas near housing estates, so that people living in the area can support recycling and even have exchange of goods or product repair centers, so that residents can be encouraged to exchange second-hand or swap second-hand goods rather than wasting what they have. And at the same time, if you want to really reduce waste, I think that the administration should step up monitoring of outsourced cleaning companies in the handling of recyclables. We found that there have been reports as well that some outsourced cleaning companies would treat recyclables as usual garbage. And therefore, because of that, some members of the public have no confidence in recycling bins placed on the streets. So I think you need to step up your monitoring and even seize this opportunity to restructure departmental roles, so there can be one department, for example, EPD, overseeing all issues related to garbage waste and recycling. You should also allocate more resources to support the development of the recycling trade, so that the public confidence in recycling can be restored. Thank you. Now let's go back to the queue. The first on the queue is Mr. Ip from Hong Kong Recycling Association. On behalf of the Hong Kong Recycling Association and Sustainability Committee, well, these two committees actually have most recyclers as members. They have more than 400 members. Having consulted the members, we hope to see the implementation of the MSW charging scheme ASAP. In the European Union, in Germany, Holland, or in Asia, Taiwan, Seoul, or South Korea, you have seen successful examples where charging successfully helped reduce waste. So our association does support the scheme. And also the EPD's MSW report found that a bit among garbage, there are a lot of recyclings, such as 1,000 tons of bottles and so forth among daily garbage. But because of the low value of petrol prices, recyclables are also of little value. So I hope that the MSW charging scheme can further expand the scope of the recycling industry. Based on experience of European Union, the MSW charge can expand the scale of recycling and also enhance productivity of the industry, which in the end will create a lot of jobs. So not just low-skilled workers can benefit. There can also be opportunities for high-end technological research. For cleaners, of course, they will have a heavier burden having to collect the waste. But if you have reduced waste, then maybe the cleaners' workload will be reduced too. And also, there is in proportional, the income of scavengers is not proportional to the amount of cardboard boxes they collect. They may make 50 boxes a day, but if they work in the recycling trade, they can make more than $100 a day. So I think encouraging recycling can promote more jobs. So MSW charging can really be beneficial to the job market. But you need to set up, alongside the scheme, set up a committee to look at the effect of the scheme. In Taiwan, there's a committee regularly reviewing the market rates for recyclables and provide subsidy for recyclers. So I think the government should set up a similar committee. Thank you. Next one is Mr. Lam Kai-chen. Thank you. I'm just speaking as an ordinary member of the public. Sorry, I don't have any script, but let me start again. We used to set up a non-garbage station supported by about 20 residents every day. Every week, we spend 2 hours there to set up a store there, welcoming residents, nearby residents and neighbors. Because we only set up the store once a week there, we encourage residents to place their garbage accumulated over a week to our station for separation. So after half a year, we found that among the displaced items, only about 10% are garbage that cannot be treated. 90% indeed can be treated in various ways. Some could be recycled and turned and converted into other products, but some can be reused, like baby strollers. So maybe the resident can just leave their baby stroller there at our store and then be given away to another parent. So this is sort of an environment where people can share their goods. So if all of these products go to the refuse collection point and landfills, then that would be very unsatisfactory. So we do support the polluter's pay approach, behind the MSW charging scheme. But we do hope that at the same time, more efforts should be made into recycling so that we can make sure usable products will not be treated as garbage dumped in landfills. We have had lots of exchanges with neighbors, and we want to highlight a few points. Firstly, there have been reports about the recycling efforts, and the government and the public have lost confidence in the government's three-colored recycling bins because they think that still the materials or goods in the bins will still go to landfills in the end. So I think you have to find a way to change the public concept of the three-colored recycling bins. You may need to make the bins transparent so people know what are inside them.
Thank you, Mr. Lam. Next is Mr. Low. Thank you. Well, most of our members are from the recycling industry. We would like to promote the recycling industry for it to develop healthily. We support the waste charging scheme for a number of reasons. Landfills have saturated, so waste disposal is an urgent matter. And we think that a lot of materials are recyclable and reusable in waste, and if we can do that, it will reduce waste. An overseas experience tell us that waste charging can enhance awareness and can improve environmental hygiene. Overseas experience also tells us that waste charging promotes the development of the recycling industry. It will create a lot of jobs, and it will also elevate the status of the recycling industry. Hong Kong people have a very strong sense of environmental protection. Waste charging can be implemented as soon as possible. Of course, there are areas that need further discussion. Say, for example, how can we increase the amount of sites for recycling? And the levy collected, can it be used to subsidize the trade? Because there is great fluctuation in the prices of recyclable materials. Thank you. Next, Mr. Chan from Friends of the Earth. In 2014, per capita waste stands at about 1.35 tons compared to other Asian countries. Is high. And we do believe that the new measure will reduce waste. There are two ways, by household, by bag, or by weight. For by weight, the cost will be apportioned by different households. However, there is the polluter pay principle. So by household, by bag should be extended to all domestic premises. A lot of stakeholders are involved, so it will be difficult for law enforcement. If a law enforcement officer found that there is waste contained in a non-designated bag, so who does it belong to? The owner's corporation, the cleaning company, or the cleaner? These should be further elaborated. We have 4 suggestions. First is to set up waste separation center in all 18 districts. Waste separation is heavily related to waste reduction. Apart from the 3-colored recycling bins, there can be other items, say for example, drink cartons or food waste. 2. Subsidizing the development of the recycling industry. The operating cost for the trade is very high. It eats into their profit. The government has set up a $1 billion recycling fund, but so far they have only approved 60% of the amount, which is 6%. We ask government to offer low rental income and longer term to give the sites to the recycling industry. The levy collected can be used for a dedicated purpose to subsidize the recycling industry. Number 3, green procurement. There is a green procurement guideline. I hope the government will update it regularly so that it will keep abreast with the time. 4, clear penalty and reward. Learning from Taipei, there needs to be a very effective reward and penalty system in place. Thank you. Thank you. Next, Mr. Poon. Thank you. We are responsible for 90 public housing estates serving over 1 million people. That means 1 out of 7 people are our service target group. We support the waste charging scheme. But we hope that, all the measures should start with public housing estate. If it proves to be successful, private residential buildings will follow. And there is also education, public education and publicity. I've attended a meeting with the EPD, and I think that their work has been quite effective. I ask you to consider the following points. Currently, for public housing estates, free bin bags are given to residents. That's part of the management company deal contract. If there are no longer free bin bags, will they actually go and buy the designated bags? We hope there will be 1 year's time in which the designated bags will be distributed to them. We hope that they will be an example for others to follow. They may take reference from the penalty system of the scoring system of public housing units. Say, for example, when your flat is extremely dirty, then points will be deducted. And I would like to speak for the contractors. Well, in the past, they have to pay $360 and $390 if they dispose the fees at landfill and refuse transfer stations. It will be quite hefty. Well, we are the Hong Kong Waste Management Association. We learned that various charging schemes may bring different results. If we are to be successful at waste reduction at source, there should be a waste charging by volume or by quantity. A clear message should be sent to the general public that everything comes with a cost. Quantity-based charging for municipal solid waste will provide an incentive. It will also generate behavior change. The Hong Kong government points out that in Taipei City and Seoul, when they have introduced waste charging scheme, there is a drop in waste generation. They have experienced waste disposal rate by 30%. In the long run, there is still room for improvement. Based on the experience of the environmental levy scheme on plastic shopping bags, the charge will bring a behavioral change. This will lengthen the lifespan of Hong Kong landfills. This will promote a greener and more sustainable society. The government should also use the levy collected to provide cash subsidy to recycling industries or sorting facilities operators. Thank you. Next, Mr. Tong from the Eddie Ju Tun Mun team. People have been talking about polluter pays, but what about producer responsibility? They generate waste. It's not just about packaging. They use sales tactics to encourage consumption, so people buy more than they need. And sometimes you only need one small part, but you have to buy the whole set. And in the end, more waste is generated. So we cast doubt on the effectiveness of the scheme. What if it's not effective? We are concerned that the charge will increase forever. This will be a financial burden. There should be at least a level under which no waste charge will be collected. Looking back at various government schemes, we see that a lot of them simply disappear. Say, for example, food waste collection, energy-saving bulb collection, but they disappear. So we wonder whether the government's actually sincere. Is it really because there is a lack of financial incentive, or is it because of a problem in waste management? People complain about recycling bins being very dirty. Some of them are at remote places, whereas others are very dirty. A lot of people also mention about the plight faced by the recycling industry. Prices for that industry fluctuate. Perhaps the recycling industry should move up the value chain so that they will produce high value products. They need to make a profit before they can expand, before they can take up all the waste recyclables that we have generated. A lot of people have cited an example. People are happy to use second-hand items. So that should be a multi-pronged approach, not just a charging. Next, Ms. Ma from Greenpeace. Thank you. Finally, the government announces the municipal waste charging scheme. We think this is the first step and a very important step to bring behavioral change. As a lot of others have said, in order for for waste reduction to be effective, there needs to be other measures. Say, for example, producer responsibility scheme. It should start to cover plastic container and other plastic items. In a lot of European countries and also South Korea, they have launched producer responsibility scheme for packaging. We should start it as soon as possible. More incentive should be given to various areas in the supply chain. Say, for example, more incentive for suppliers to improve their manufacturing process. And there also needs to be a change in behavior, less consumerism. The government should take the lead and put in place pilot schemes like Taipei. Disposable items, say plastic bags, plastic bottles, and plastic utensils should be banned in government buildings. There should be also recycle bins for different items, say old electric appliances or old clothes. And they also should make sure that recyclables should be properly used. It was found that clothes put in recycle bins end up in the landfill. The government should also enhance public education and publicity. This should cover the community green station. Members of the public should be informed about the various locations of recycle bins and community green stations. There should be clear objectives and regular inspection. All in law, Greenpeace advocates a comprehensive monitoring system so that waste charging scheme can be effectively implemented. At the beginning, the operation, the charging level should be reviewed. The results should be made public as well. Thank you. Next is Ms. Leung. We have talked to a lot of cleaners of the FEHD. They have expressed concern about the waste charging scheme. We don't see officials from the FEHD. We have some suggestions anyway. Cleaners are concerned that since they are frontline workers, they deal with a waste disposal at FEHD refuse collection points, say for example illegal disposal. It says that in the first 6 months there will be additional FEHD manpower to conduct visual inspection at these stations. And illegal disposal will be rejected. But after 6 months, there will only be surprise checks. I do hope the FEHD will increase manpower. So that cleaners will be able to deal with different situations. Support should be given to them. Clear guidelines should be given and instructions should be given to them whether to reject or whether to do something else. And in relation to waste reduction, I also have some suggestions to make. Effectiveness of recycling. A lot of people said that the recycling rate is quite unsatisfactory. Baguio has been doing that job for a long time. People dispose of recyclables in these recycle bins, but they all end up in landfill. And I see from reports or papers from the panel saying that the FEHD will conduct surprise check, but they have not found serious breach. We have doubts. We want more effective checks and inspections. Next, Mr. Chan. We strongly support the waste charging scheme. Over a long time, the government has been doing a lot of consultation. We are the last Asian city that hasn't done it. We see from other examples that waste reduction and recycle rate will both increase after waste charging. We need mechanisms to make it effective. The third point is that we are opposed to doing it by phases. It should be done in one go. Say, for example, if you swim, if you don't get into the water, you never learn how to swim. No plan is perfect. All stakeholders will have their own concern and their own interest. We hope that in the coming year or two, before and after legislation, there can be some fine-tuning. But in certain districts, there can be pilot schemes. And I believe that a lot of people are already doing that. Continuous review will improve the plan. More experience and data can be collected to fine-tune the scheme. I ask the stakeholders to set aside their differences to support the scheme. Of course, we hope that legislative members will support it as well. Some personal comments. We've been talking about green procurement, green measures. We do need green education. We learned from Taiwan that they have green education in primary and secondary schools, so that when they grow up, they will strongly support green measures.
Next, Model 1 Scale Workers Union of the FEHD, Mr. Chen. Now, very often the responsibility is placed on the people. Actually, there is over-packaging by the producers. In recent years, the public awareness has increased. Domestic waste has reduced year by year. Now, on waste charging, there should be serious producer responsibility schemes. Actually, the charge for waste is already included in rates and rents to the government. Now, since the penalty for improper waste disposal has increased to $1,500, and since the waste disposal charge has been introduced, we haven't seen real effectiveness. There are several thousand cases of complaints each year. Now, the solid waste arrangement was determined by the EPD but implemented by the FEHD, and there are less recycling bins on the streets. We are concerned that upon the scheme being introduced, people will evade the scheme by discarding the waste all over the place, and our work will become more difficult. The FEHD says that it will increase the number of prosecutions and increase the manpower in that regard, but it will not increase the number of cleaning workers. And regulations are making things difficult. The workers at the refuse collection points are asked to reject refuse without the designated bags. This is hard to achieve. Mr. Lau? Now, waste charging in theory should reduce waste. So there should be room for the refuse collection points to do more. We can face the community more. The recycling process should be open to the public for joint effort. There should be pilot schemes. Now they say they will review the design of the refuse collection points. They have only reviewed the distribution of the recycling bins. So there should be a study. There should be a pilot scheme for reform of the refuse collection points. The government says there is no space, but actually they don't really require that much space. And on the 10th of May, now there was a study that was discussed, which showed that there can be pilot reform of the refuse collection points. Now there are many recycling channels, but we think the producer responsibility scheme is also important. Now, one point is the sites for recycling industry. Now, the government is talking about using brown sites for housing, but many of these brown sites are used by recyclers. Now, so will the recyclers will be forced to relocate to expensive recycling parks? So the government should review to the public the findings of its studies. Next, Hong Kong cleaning company. Now, the modes of charging have been disclosed. Now, there is no need for designated bags at for certain buildings that are without management companies. So the responsibility is placed on the property management, on the owners' corporations. So a lot of effort will be expended, so a lot of monitoring will be required, so the property so the owners' monthly fees will have to be increased. Now, only designated bags can be used at refuse collection vehicles and points. So the cleaning contractors have to ensure that all the waste are wrapped up in designated bags before they can be put in refuse collection vehicles. Yet, we assess that people will not really comply. The compliance rate may be less than 40%. So, if the EPD doesn't coordinate and provide more bags of different sizes. Otherwise, the staff will face problems and environmental hygiene will deteriorate and costs will have to be increased. So the public will not benefit. Finally, we hope that the EPD officials should communicate more with the operators to reduce the disputes involved. Mr. Yip of Western District Momentum. Now, I will talk about the views of the Western District residents. Now, many residents tell us that the charges will be obliged to try to save money by discarding the waste all over the street. Now, the mic is on again. You have a few more seconds. Now, many residents feel that even $1 or $2 should be saved. So, many people will try to discard waste on the street, and the FEHD's workload will be increased. So, the government should educate the public more, and people should have their waste recycled at home. And waste recycling is the work of the EPD, and yet it's FEHD that actually does the work. And a lot of the waste collected at recycling bins end up at the landfill, so the public is losing confidence. So whether it's the FEHD or the EPD, now you are one government. The two departments should communicate more to improve the situation. The government's recycling now it's done through two departments. Now some residents find that medical waste is discarded alongside the recycling bins. There are syringes and so on. Now, so for untrained workers to handle that is very dangerous. And we can see that if the environmental health policies fall under one department, as they were under the Urban Council, then the public will be encouraged. Mr. Fan, Samching Association. We welcome and support the solid waste, municipal solid waste charging scheme. In the better part of the last year, we took part in a committee participation program in Sham Shui Po. Now, we have some observations. Firstly, on the charging level, we think that the proposed level is reasonable. Municipal solid waste is a new issue for people to adjust to. If the level of charge is too high at the outset, then people will resent that. Now, we should increase the quantity of waste recycled. Now, many members of the public tell us that recycling now is inconvenient. They are not sure what types of materials can be recycled. After our publicity efforts, they became very enthusiastic. So We think there should be a stepping up of environmental protection education. There should be increase in community recycling facilities. The public should develop a habit for recycling. Now, on taking forward waste charging, members of the public tell us there are lots of plastic bags in their homes already. When the designated bags are available, they may not use those bags. They may use one bag within the other. So we suggest that there should be less plastic bags being circulated in the market, and people should be encouraged to cultivate the habit of using less plastic bags. We think Hong Kong is already behind, and legislation should be early. Ms. Ho of North District. Now, the government often says that there should be separation of waste at source. We suggest that the government should provide incentive scheme Now, people should provide clean, recycled objects and get free designated bags. Now, it's said that every day there are 2,100 tons of plastic waste. That's 21% of municipal solid waste. Now, in 2015, only 5,400 tons of plastics are recycled. The rest go to the landfill. Now, comparing 2013 to 2015, the amount of plastics recycled has fallen by 40%. And the Productivity Council also had a study report. And it was told by plastics recycling operators that costs are high, transportation cost is a very large share, rentals are high. So for plastics recycling, the profit margin is very, very low because prices have fallen sharply. So they barely earn any profit. So if the government wants to engage in recycling, it should provide more resources to the industry, either in money or in land. Now, you can provide us with a copy of your written document. Next, Ms. Chung, Concerned Group for Women in the Shek Wu Hui District. I live in New Territories North in a tenement building. There are many children in the family. We have to discard waste many times a day, and the subdivided unit is small. The children don't have space to do homework. So how can we have the space for recycling? And in the old district, many are tenement buildings. No one is engaged to dump the waste, so we have to take the waste at night by ourselves with the children. We have to go to the waste collection point. We have to walk 6 or 7 blocks. The road is poorly lit, we are concerned about safety. Now, if we wait till the next morning, now all the bins are filled with the packaging materials left by the parallel traders. So we can't dispose of the waste. Now, if the number of bins are to be reduced, then we are actually paying for the parallel traders. They can use government resources to dispose of their waste, and FEHD has never requested them to dispose of their commercial waste at the refuse collection points, whereas often the residents are penalized. So the residents of the subdivided units pay for the bags, and yet they will not be able to pay for the yet they will not be able to discard the waste. Now, we don't have any recycling industry that can actually recycle the materials collected. So this is an unfair charging scheme for the grassroots. The community is not really helped. Our quality of life is not improved. Thank you. Mr. Shack next. I'm sorry, it's Mr. Tam first. Phúc Chun in New Territories. Our group is against it. We think it should be shelved for now, the scheme, because you don't have the support measures, you don't have the resources, you just want to collect the charges in a hurry. The EPD makes it an offense not to comply. You must first develop a recycling network. The government should try to nurture an industry for recycling. There should be manufacturing plants offering through train service and generating jobs.
In 2013, it laid down a 10-year plan and included proposal to introduce a plastic bag levy, and then it wanted to reduce waste, and it has shifted the responsibility of reducing waste to the public. The EPD should have made reference to the legislative process in Taiwan and Singapore. They made mandatory for people to separate waste as source, increase publicity, and also step up recycling as well. In Singapore and Taiwan, because of the effective implementation, the quantity of garbage was reduced. The Taiwan Environment Bureau has also devised regular rules and also provide a stable basis for implementing the law. And it has also set up recycling facilities, creating a right environment for encouraging people to reduce waste and also comply with the charging scheme. I think the government should shelve the legislative proposal and come up with relevant enough support measures first. Next one is representative from the Shaku Area Concern Group, Ms. Shi. Let me thank the LegCo and Chairman for arranging for me and my baby to attend today's hearing. The baby is now 3-year-old, but no one can help me, therefore I need to bring him along. I live in New Territories North in a tenement building. Every day I raise the child on my own, Sometimes I need to actually move around together with the baby stroller, and our flat is so cramped. I need to keep an eye on the baby while I'm cooking or in the toilet. So even if I have the garbage, I wouldn't be able to take them out to faraway locations or outside the building for disposal. And same for elderly people or people with physical conditions. For various reasons, they may not be able to take the garbage to recycling locations. So has the government considered the difficulties faced by these families? So you have to make sure that whether everyone can really dispose of the garbage. Suppose that you need to provide, for example, allow community centers to operate as a recycling station, to be open to people who want to bring their recyclables there. And you need to allow neighbors or residents with babies to take their baby products or other products to the recycling centers, so that they wouldn't create waste. So you need to get the community centers to help. And we can also bring our household products to there. And also, recycling organizations can first collect all these products from neighbors, so that neighbors would not easily dispose of their unwanted products as garbage. So I hope that the government can collaborate more with the community. I hope that the government could really take on board our views and help grassroots families tackle basic problems. Thank you. Next one is Ms. Young from the Northern District Employment Concern Group. Good evening. I'm from the New Territories North District. I live in a cubicle flat. Because we live in a subdivided flat, the space is very limited. The rent is high, though. And our environment is so cramped. It's typical of grassroots families. So I feel that you should put more emphasis on cutting waste at source rather than charging waste. Because who do you want to charge for waste? You should not target the grassroots. You should encourage your families to actually be given more support, even if they want to repair their homes. Because people on CSSA should also be given exemption due to their financial difficulties. And also, people receiving government subsidies could be exempt as well, like the low-income families or families who are receiving transportation allowance or disability allowance, old people living allowance, or student financial assistance. I think people in these categories should be given exemption. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Yang. Next one is Mr. Koo from CMI Society. I feel that the government say, it wants to implement the scheme next year. I think it lacks, however, comprehensive planning and support for recycling. I don't support the charging scheme. Every household now has to pay the rates, which include the cost for disposing of garbage. I think the government is just shirking its responsibility and try to pass the ball to the public and get the public bear the penalty. So why shouldn't the government shoulder the responsibility itself? So it should really, for manufacturers, retailers, distributors, even supermarkets, particularly supermarkets, because every month they try to sell their products through big sales and encouraging people to buy a lot of unnecessary items, creating waste. This is what I got from a friend, and this is what my friend gave me. He asked me to give it back to the supermarket because he didn't want to waste this packaging. So supermarkets are responsible. He could actually have got back papers, cartons, tins from their customers. So the government should really target all these operators, as I said, suppliers, public. Suppliers actually should have packaged their products in an environmental friendly way. They shouldn't have bulky packaging to attract buyers, because that would result in waste. I also suggest that the public, say on Monday, they can get the designated bags, and Tuesday they can return the waste papers, and Wednesday they can return glass bottles, and Thursday kitchen waste and so forth. And then they can return these products to the collection points and then get the bags in return and free. And kitchen waste must be tackled first. How do we tackle that? The government should allocate more resources to create kitchen waste center. You can outsource it to contractors, outside contractors. You can, in the long run, develop kitchen waste centers like in Japan with by generating electricity through the kitchen waste. If the government wants to charge waste, it should do it in a gradual manner. Thank you. Next one is Mr. Lam Kai-on from the New Territories Outsourced Cleaning Workers Association. I think you can imagine that this charging scheme has much negative implications for cleaning workers, particularly for us who work in New Territories North. You know, there in that region, retail activities are very active. Parallel traders create so much garbage. And in order to cut the number and salaries of cleaners, we now are put under a heavy workload, and our burden is so heavy. And Shangshui, Wuhui area, in the litter container, you will see that actually in a minute or so, all these litter containers are full. If you introduce the waste charging scheme, say if there are lots of cardboard boxes or packaging papers or renovation materials left on the street, what can we do with them? If there are no designated labels on the waste, what can we do with them? How do we know or how to separate the waste, and who will be prosecuted in the end? We in the front line are already short of fellow laborers. So how can we make sure that we can comply with the law without increased workload? I think what you can imagine is the vicious cycle of more cleaners leaving the job. And you will also, in a way, encourage more illegal behaviors, causing garbage to pile up, worsening the environmental hygiene, and creating more conflicts between the law enforcement officers and members of the public. So there's no way you can enforce the law. In the New Territories North, there are lots of rural villages which are cleaned every day by the cleaners. Every day we have to walk up and down the hill and to various sites to clear up the refuse collection points, and the villagers dispose of the garbage at different times in the day. So how can you properly monitor the situation? There's anonymous workers said that unless you have 24 hours monitoring, otherwise you can expect a lot of illegally disposed garbage. Even environmental hygiene officers would not be able to stop illegal disposal of garbage. Not to mention people like us, cleaners, ordinary cleaners like us, and we cannot deter any members of the public from disposing of garbage illegally. But if you expect cleaners to monitor the situation, that would be very worrying to us. I think the government should ASAP introduce effective measures to ensure there's proper monitoring and effective enforcement of the law. You need to have comprehensive planning and take into consideration our workload and the difficulties of us in enforcing the law, and our also manpower shortage as well. Next one is a representative from the Catholic Diocese Pastoral Center for Workers. In our work, we are always in contact with outsourced cleaners, and many cleaners are actually filled with frustrations. This charging scheme, you can hear at today's hearing that the Environmental Protection or Environment Bureau has no representative here, but the Bureau is the one or it's the department that has the highest powers. You need to address the concerns of frontline workers. You need to coordinate the work of frontline workers. If you don't do that, it will be very difficult for us to implement a meaningful MW and SW charging scheme. Our understanding is that FEHD is responsible for hygiene work. They deal with actually compliance with the garbage law. All they can do is to issue summons. And EPD has to deal with the collection of waste, but enforcement and collection of waste, they are two separate matters. But it turns out that all matters related to waste are dealt with by FEHD, and the EPD asks the outsourced workers to collect the waste. But this will only create conflicts because this put frontline FEHD workers under a lot of pressure, and the cleaners themselves just have to bear with a lot of grievances. They saw cardboard boxes, furniture, all sorts of household furniture or appliances lying in back alleys. And they will not distinguish between whether they are industrial, commercial, or domestic waste. As long as there's waste on the street, the outsourced workers would just take them away. And we don't know how or who you can charge the fee. And for cleaners, the biggest worry is that now, with the summons for illegal disposal of waste, so in the future, with the charge for MSW, that could cause more people to dispose of their garbage on the street. That means the workers will face an even heavier workload. And we don't see any chances of outsourced companies increasing their staff establishment. So how are you going to enforce the law then, to implement the scheme? Workers are very pessimistic about what will happen in the future. I agree with the proposal to set up a new government department, and also you should restructure the collection, waste reduction and recycling of waste. You need to have a dedicated department to deal with the matter. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Chang. May I ask the administration to respond first, and then see members if they have any questions? Didi, please. Yeah, thank you, deputations, for giving us your valuable views. I think on several points, as you mentioned, arrangement for law enforcement. At the previous two sessions, we've said that we mentioned about how we're going to deal with the enforcement side. I know deputations today have expressed concern about the difficulties facing frontline workers and their worries for the future. I think in making the arrangements for enforcement, we will definitely have close liaison with FEHD to decide on the future arrangements for law enforcement. As for the details of implementing the law, frontline workers will have to have adequate understanding of the law, and there must be adequate manpower provision as well. So we will make sure that that will be done. And your views are taken on board, and we will go back and discuss with FEHD on how we can actually create better results. And you also talk about recycling support, particularly for single block buildings or tenement buildings. You're worried that in the future, how can we really ensure recycling happens and the waste can be reduced and so on? In the future, we will go to the buildings in the future to teach households how to comply with the law. We do have plans in mind in reaching out to the residents in those buildings. And there's also a suggestion for handling plastics. I think right now, situation is the plastic bottles, because of their low value, even after they're collected, no recyclers would deal with plastic bottles. We understand that, and we know that in the market, plastics is recycled plastic because of external factors have dropped in value. So we have found from recyclers that is clean plastics are very important. If the plastic bottles are not clean, then the value will drop further. So we need to promote the message, the relevant message, to ensure that recycling can be done better. We do have some ideas in mind. As for plastic bottles itself, themselves. I think we are going to conduct a feasibility study on the recycling of plastic bottles. And there's also mention about recycling on the roadsides, like setting up stores, recycling stores there. We will try to increase in recycling bins on the street. That's our plan. And I know you're also concerned about management of recycling bins, the management of them, whether they will just end up going to landfill, the materials inside the bins. So I will ask my colleague to supplement. That is, how we're going to enhance the contractual management of recycling bins on the streets to make sure that those inside are properly treated. Mr. Wong. Just then, deputations mentioned the concern, but let me supplement that about how we monitor the management of outsourced recycling bins. You may know that on the streets, the three-colored recycling bins are dedicated containers to collect recyclables, and the recyclables must be put in plastic bags to help with the monitoring by the government and the public. And the bags are also made of recyclable materials, so that the materials put inside recycling bins would not be the same or mixed up with other garbage in the litter containers. And they also need the requirement that the recycling materials must be transported by a truck to designated recycling yards, and the fleet used to transport the recyclables have to have GPS to enable us to track their journeys, to make sure that they are going to designated landfills. And as for how much plastic materials or metal materials are being recycled, each month the recycling company concerned must make a report to EPD to facilitate our monitoring of the amount of recycled goods. I know the public is very concerned about the actual recycling done. Therefore, we and the FEHD colleagues would carry out random inspections on the bins and to make sure that the contractors are complying with the contractual requirements. If there are any inadequacies that we've identified, we could issue warning letters to the recyclers and the collectors.
Thank you. I don't think you have anything else to add. I would like to ask if members have any questions. This meeting lasts till 7:40 only. You have questions to ask? Sorry. You each will have 3 minutes, I'm afraid, because I still have one item to deal with. Mr. Eddie Ju. Thank you. I find it quite strange that the FEHD is not here. We see some staff associations, but there is no counterpart. Just now, the deputy director did not answer. In this session, we see more grassroots talking about their plights. There is one who mentioned about refund or exemption, that the possible target group may be CSSA recipients. But what about those who receive subsidy from, say, Community Care Fund? Madam Sheikh mentioned about funding to NGOs to help them deal with waste collection or recycling. Mr. Ng, it's about some fund to get outreach teams. You will ask them to do briefing sessions, but what about follow-up? There is one measure to make sure that measures are more targeted. They will go to different premises to explain to households. We have a general idea. We'll work out the details. Mr. Chu asked us if we would provide some kind of subsidy to CSSA recipients. Our idea is not to have any exemption because it's everyone's responsibility to reduce waste, but we have some kind of support that may be directed towards CSSA recipients. And as to whether further assistance may be given to similar groups, we will have to go back and think about it. I hope the administration will give us the pilot scheme report of the municipal waste charging scheme 2014. Mr. Leung mentioned about a report of sites to support the recycling industry. I have briefly introduced the result of the pilot operation. I will give you more information afterwards. So 2 reports, one related to the pilot scheme and the second one related to sites. I will defer to Mr. Wong. My understanding is that it is still in progress. Thank you, Mr. Chu. We are still conducting the study. How much longer will you need? 3 months or 6 months? 3 months to 6 months. As soon as it's completed, it will be uploaded onto the EPD website. So it's still in progress. I hope that we will have the entire report and not a redacted version. Dr. Edward Yu, about parallel goods traders in the North District. They take away the packaging and also those pallets, the pallets, and then just dump them next to rubbish bins. What measures do you have to make sure it doesn't happen? On a retail level, would there be measures to mandate them to take back packaging? And in public organizations and schools, would there be a ban on disposable items? When it comes to illegal disposal, at certain locations, the situation is more serious. Mr. Yu would like to know more about the situation. The FEHD takes enforcement action against illegal disposal. But as to details about certain locations, we will have to find more information from the FEHD after the meeting. And as to other requirements under the law to mandate manufacturers of packaging materials to take them back, the focus of our work is to use education and publicity to reduce waste. We also hope that manufacturers will reduce the use of unnecessary packaging. Quantity-based waste charging is very important. It is a policy tool to reduce waste. We have learned from other places with waste charging, there will be consumer demand for fewer or less packaging. At this point, it will be difficult to legislate for manufacturers to reduce the amount of packaging material. Thank you very much for deputations and individuals to come to attend to this meeting. If you have any written submissions, please give it to our staff member. You may now leave. Thank you very much. And a happy Dragon Boat Day. Next. Well, I have some questions to ask. What is the latest timetable for the introduction of the bill? We've heard a lot It's not just today. Well, since 20th of March, when we have publicized the details, we've heard different views. When it comes to implementation details, we will collate views. Our preliminary view is that some details can be further improved. So we may need to adjust the relevant parts. So it will be later this year when we introduce the bill to the LegCo. We still hope that in the second half of 2019, this arrangement will be put in place. So it will be after the summer recess, right? I think so. Thank you. And I thank government officials and colleagues. Any other business? I don't think there is any. So happy Dragon Boat Day. Thank you very much.